And we are live on Facebook. So, good afternoon, everyone who's watching us at this moment or watching us on YouTube. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carolina Quesada with the Nonprofit Partnership and welcoming you to this segment of Our Stories, Our Time. In this series, we are interviewing nonprofit leaders to understand how organizations are navigating through the challenges of these current times. And before I introduce our guest today, the Nonprofit Partnership wishes to thank the Port of Long Beach for their generous support of this series. Again, if you are joining us live on Facebook, because that's what we do, we broadcast these interviews live, real time on Facebook, then we invite you to engage and leave comments for our guest in the chat box, in the comment box. If you want to say, hooray, Trinka, way to go, then please leave those comments in the box as well. And so without further ado, I would love to introduce Trinka Rowsell, Executive Director of Partners for Parks. Trinka, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be part of this series.
Awesome. So let's get to know a little bit about you. And I think there's lots to tell there. Of course, we're going to get into Partners for Parks in a minute, but it would be good for us to just get to know a little bit more about your background and how you came to the nonprofit sector. So tell us a bit of your story.
I've sort of been a Jane of all trades, if you will, throughout my life and sort of gone where the opportunities took me, where there was a need and what I was passionate about. I found nonprofit work and nonprofit volunteerism about 16 years ago when I joined Junior League of Long Beach. At the time, I was working for Farmers and Merchants Bank, and I had the stability of a schedule that I could actually had time to volunteer. And so I found a Junior League because I had gone to an event with a friend in the past and looked at my local chapter and sort of fell in love with volunteering and then the leadership opportunities and the training that involved. And I'm still a member today, active member. I served many years, mostly years in leadership on the board of directors and was president as well. And it was during that time that I actually found my natural skill and honed my skills in fundraising and grant writing. So after I left the bank and was home with my kids for a few years and doing nonprofit board development and consulting, I was approached by our current board president, Ron Antoinette, who said, hey, we're looking for a part-time executive director for Partners of Parks. And he sort of, and I'm like, what's Partners of Parks? As a lot of you might be saying, what is that? What is Partners of Parks? So I learned more about the organization and I said, I think you just described my dream job. I'm like, I love parks. My youngest was 2 years old at the time. So I wasn't exactly ready to go back yet, but when opportunity presents itself, I'm like, we might be able to make this work. And all of my formative memories occurred in parks. And since I had kids, I have spent, driven and ridden and millions of miles, what seems like millions of miles on the stroller in the parks. I walked my last 2 pregnancies. I walked every single day at the nature center. So this had a real deep connection for me. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, because when I left the bank and went home with my kids and, was doing this nonprofit work, I decided that if I was to go back into the workforce, I really wanted it to be something that I have a deep passion for. Because life is short and I believe you should do what you love. And as they say, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. So this was a natural fit for me, and being able to go part-time and sort of help grow the organization and really work on fundraising and help take them to the next level. It was a perfect place for me to be. And I think it's gone well. It'll be 4 years in September.
And it's interesting because later on we'll also come to know how a lot of your experience, not just as a volunteer, as a board member, but also in your professional trajectory has really contributed quite a bit to the organization and how you engage with your partners. And so I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I know a little bit of the story in advance, but we'll talk it through. So now focusing on the organization, Partners of Parks, give us more of a sense then of the kinds of programs that you're running, who you're supporting, how you're really making an impact in local community development. Because I think there's a great story to uncover here on that.
Okay. So Partners of Parks was actually founded as a Friends of Long Beach Parks group in 1981 by three well-meaning citizens, Bob Lamond, B. Antinor, and Betty Davenport. And to this day, I'm still hearing stories about Betty. They wanted to protect parks and open space. In 1985, they formed as a nonprofit group, Partners of Parks. And then in 1989, they engaged in a contract relationship with the city of Long Beach to basically define the relationship to say, we're allowed to raise money for Long Beach parks. So since then, we have grown over the years. So we're 37 years. We were 35. We were celebrating 35 years in the midst of the pandemic, and everything's been a blur since then. So when I joined, part of what the organization and the board was looking to do when I joined Partners of Parks was to expand our fiscal sponsorship arm into supporting neighborhood groups. Because as I was mentioning to Carolina earlier, there's a lot of well-meaning individuals that would like to help support their community, but they don't necessarily know how to go about doing it, nor do they want to take on the task or the risk or the responsibility of starting their own 501c3. And so that's sort of where we come in as a fiscal agent. So that's one arm of what we do. And obviously we support, programs in the parks, programs and recreation, people and organized groups that want to do fundraising or events in parks. So we raise money for the Long Beach Municipal Band, who's about 112 or 113 years this year.
Wow.
The full season that we're looking forward to, thankfully. So grateful for that. We sponsor the Movies in the Parks program. At the municipal band concerts, we are there every single night. We table, we help pass the buckets. We secure the large sponsorships for that. Movies in the park. So intermittent concerts in the park if different districts want to have one-off concerts. And then something that our organization started in 2014 was called the Youth Scholarship Program, where we supply scholarships to low-income Long Beach youth that the only qualifier is free or reduced price meals at their school. And we give them access to classes of their choice, paid fee-based classes of their choice of the Parks and Rec catalog, up to $150 per year for free. So
wow.
Since 2014, we've scholarshiped about 400 plus individuals in Long Beach and granted out about $25,000.
That's quite an access point for these youth, isn't it?
Yeah. What's nice about it and what our funders like about it and what we like too is we're not just a program that says, hey, we have one class for you. They get to go in and search a whole catalog of, at its height, thousands of classes. Obviously, that's been impacted by COVID. Thousands of classes from cooking to karate to hip hop dance, and they get to choose what their class is, rather than just going to a program and saying, okay, this is part of the benefit of what we offer. They get to pick. So that's what makes it interesting. And I think in a lot of ways more impactful for the kids that are part of the program.
And it's interesting because I think in that sense, you're not necessarily a youth serving organization, but in many ways, well, you really are because you are running a program, you're overseeing a program and an activity that really opens up so many doors for young people who probably otherwise would not have the chance to do that. And one of the comments that I made to you right before we went live is like, I don't know how many folks really understand kind of the uniqueness of the organizational structure you have, and your role in the community. And just minutes ago, you did talk about your fiscal sponsorship role, and I wonder if we can stay a little bit longer here to talk about that, because in fiscal sponsorship, you really are providing that backbone support to a group that perhaps doesn't yet have their 501c3. Is that correct?
Correct.
or a lot of those systems in place sometimes to be able to move forward with their own programming.
So I would say, if you're in the industry, you know what fiscal sponsorship means. But for those of you who don't know what that means is, I'm a neighborhood group. I've got, 5 neighbors that want to be part of a group, and we want to do good in the community. We want to raise money. But we want to raise money in a way that it's tax deductible for those who support us.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way to do that is to form your own 501c3, which is not super challenging to do. But then the requirement of that is then you have to file taxes every year. You have to file a 990 every year. You're required to have, a statement of information that's, and you have to provide your own insurance for all the activities that you do. So you can do that, but remember, you're well-meaning right now, and so are your neighbors, but life happens, and say 3 years from now, you can't be involved anymore. But yet you've raised money and it's sitting in an account somewhere, and then what happens with that?
Mm-hmm.
So what we provide is continuity, oversight. I would say the best benefits are really oversight, continuity, insurance, financial management.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the top benefits. Because we're small, I can turn around an invoice and a check within 24 hours if you need to. And that does happen a lot. Not as often, probably more often than we would like, but it's just the security of an organization. Mm-hmm. We weren't formed yesterday. We've been around for 37 years. Mm-hmm. And I take this job very seriously. I have a lot of experience in fundraising and very detail oriented. And I think it's just sort of a really big safety net, is what I would say.
And Trinka, would you say that, Partners for Parks has also incubated some organizations that, have grown as a result of partnering with you in this way? And that's also important, that there's some incubation happening there. There's some support as organizations are kind of trying to figure out, let's hone in on the mission, on our work and our impact. And all this time, they've had this really crucial support from you along the way.
Absolutely. One of our most active neighborhood groups is AOC7 Neighborhood Group. Mm-hmm. AOC7 stands for Anaheim, Orange, Cherry, and 7. They've been recognized as Nonprofit of the Year by Senator Lena Gonzalez. And the area that they support around MacArthur Park in Cambodia Town is also the first zip code that was actually proposed in Long Beach to be a recipient of a universal basic income program. So they are supporting the area with the most need.
Yeah.
Definitely their work and their efforts are tireless, and the benefit they provide to the community is really, for what they specifically do, unmatched. I mean, I'm super impressed by them.
If anyone, sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Go ahead. Well, we actually nominated them, or we awarded them at Partners of Parks fundraiser last fall as our affiliate of the year.
Wow.
And provided them a $500 grant for their activities. They are experts at fundraising and grant writing, and really doing a lot, really making the dollars go as far as they can to provide the most benefit for the community. So.
Wow, that's wonderful. I mean, thank you for sharing that example, because I think that really brings to life the impact of the work that you're doing on an organization that's doing really vital and important work in neighborhoods at a neighborhood level. And if AOC7 is watching, or eventually will watch, congratulations.
Right.
But that, to your point, that's been a trajectory of a lot of hard work. And along that way, you've been there to support. Again, we're talking about a lot of the system support that comes into play. And you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Giving them advice. Yes, you can do this. No, you can't do this. And here's why. Right. Because that's the thing. It's my job to know that, not necessarily theirs, like what the nonprofit laws are and what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. That's what my job is. And that's why you have a fiscal sponsor, so that they can, keep you on an even path.
And whatever that trajectory is for them and how they make decisions along that pathway, but you're there to support, right? Again, it's that system support that is so important to a lot of organizations. So partnerships, affiliates, This is a really important part of how you do this work, how you continue to support our local community. I think it's important for folks to recognize that there is a lot to be said around how you support, whether you're incubating or you're supporting in other ways, nonprofits that are doing really critical work in the community. So partnership is an integral part of this model that you have. Tell us about some of the shifts that you've seen since the pandemic broke out. How has that impacted partnerships? Have you been able to go in deeper? Tell us more about that experience.
Obviously traditional summer programming was canceled completely. So no municipal band, no movies in the park, no concerts in the park, and no scholarship classes. So I'm like, okay, I have these scholarship funds that I'm raising that I can't use right now. How can we be creative in scholarshiping online classes with the Recovery Act funds, right? That wasn't, the need wasn't there. So we pivoted to encouraging our affiliate groups to find how can you support your community, from a social distance, right? There were a lot of Zoom seminars, resource-based, but like I said, again, this is going to be the AOC 7 neighborhood group show, but they were the ones who pivoted the most because I said they already had a severely impacted low-income community. They were disproportionately impacted by job loss, by COVID cases, and food insecurity. So I feel like the priority for us and our neighborhood groups for this neighborhood group in particular, became food insecurity. We noticed it in AOC 7 and in our senior population. So AOC 7 transitioned their events to contactless drive-through food pantries. We did the same for holiday events. So for Thanksgiving, at spring break, when we knew families were going to be home without being able to pick up a daily free meal from the school, yeah, they made sure to do a food pantry right before then, so that the families would have a bag of groceries that would last them, of sustainable items that would last them through the week, like staples. And also with the Long Beach Gray Panthers, they approached us. They were able to receive a grant from the Coronavirus Disaster Relief Fund, and Partners of Parks matched that with another $5,000. And we formed what's called the Donna Helsley Senior Food Fund.
Wow.
Donna Helsley is a Parks employee who received her universal, the check. And she said, I don't need this money. There are people that need it more than us. And she gave, a $300 check to us and several checks to other organizations. And we were inspired by that.
Wow.
And so she said to put it where it was needed most. And so we created the food fund in her honor.
Wow.
And
we recently had Gray Panthers
I know you did.
not long ago, and she was talking about this work. So here's yet another connection with, something that's important and happening in our community.
So Gray Panthers is a perfect example of someone who is their own nonprofit, but also uses us as a fiscal agent, because they're their own nonprofit, but they have the same leadership challenges of, hey, we don't want to have to do our own taxes, and we want the oversight, right? We want the financial or the fiscal oversight, and we want those dollars to be managed in a way that's a little bit beyond what we can support as a capacity as a group. And they utilize us to manage fiscal oversight for their larger grants. So that's a really good example of sort of both sides of the street, if you will. But with the Donna Helsley Senior Food Fund, so it was born out of food insecurity in seniors, because the senior centers were closed down. Seniors were our highest risk population. And we had a lot of homebound seniors that, while a number of organizations started food delivery programs, some of them had dietary restrictions that weren't being met, or if they had dental issues and they couldn't chew hard sandwich bread. And so what the grocery gift card program allowed them to do was buy food that they can eat, or that they like, that's specific to their needs, right? If it has to be low salt or, sugar-free, or, for diabetics, then they could do that. That gave them the flexibility. And a lot of them, even though they were on, traditional, Social Security, they still ran out of money at the end of the month, and they were going without food. So this made a drastic difference for them. And the need has continued so much that while it was intended to just be a COVID specific program, we're still getting calls. The community's still getting calls.
Right.
And we've distributed nearly $50,000.
Wow.
And
that's amazing.
2020.
Wow.
So, yeah. And because the way that we pivoted to during the pandemic, traditionally we would use Long Beach Gives to raise money for our scholarship program. But last year, because there were no classes operating, there were no contract classes operating, we pivoted and we used the Long Beach Gives to raise money for the Senior Food Fund, because we were depleting funds in that account faster than anything else because of the need. And so we were doing, through that fund, we were doing holiday meals as well, like gift card, holiday meals at Thanksgiving, holiday cards at Christmas, and we're also doing gift cards for Easter coming up.
Yeah.
Well,
It's amazing. Here we are listening to you share about, the challenges, how you were really trying to address these challenges. And let's not lose sight of the fact that were it not for your role as a fiscal sponsor, but also really as that partner, because we know you're there as a thought partner. We know that you're there to help also look at strategy as well when it comes to fundraising, and maybe even some distribution channels if some of the conversations come to that. But the power of collaboration, I think is something that Trinka, you and your organization have always, really talked about, and I think really modeled. And boy, what a time to really highlight the impact of that then during this pandemic time. And even as we think about, how systems have to change to be a lot more responsive to where the need really is. That also offers an opportunity for Partners for Parks to continue to model this a little differently too.
Right. I think so much of what we do, so yes, there's the fiscal management and fiscal partnership, but so much of what we do is service-based, right? For us, it's about the service. Not only do you get the services that you need, but like we're helpful, we're responsive. It was, it's my colleague out at the Vons buying the gift cards and getting them to Karen to distribute. So like it's us physically doing that, right? It's me, going to a partner event, during their fundraiser, helping them count out their cash and taking it back to the office and making sure that it gets deposited. So like, it's a physical presence as well, right?
Yeah, deprogrammatic support is what you're describing there too.
Right. So yes, there are other fiscal agents available, but I think one of the things that we pride ourselves on is sort of on that you won't get the same level of service. There's not somebody else that's going to go to the the extra mile, if you will, the way that we do, because it's important to us to be able to provide that service experience to these groups that need that support and need that guidance.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
To ultimately benefit the community. So, that's
absolutely. And then, this is also a reminder that a lot of the organizations that are doing this really important work of making sure that certain members of our community are not forgotten, that, their needs are addressed, that they're also under resourced. So having you as a true partner, you're describing something that's a true partnership here, is really fundamental and critical. Is there also something to be said about how you are partnering with the city and trying to get more responsive programming out to the residents of our city as well? And I think you were touching on that earlier too in your examples of how you're reaching out to young people, but tell us a little bit more so we can understand that aspect of it too.
I think parks as a department in particular, I think they're managing 170 parks and the programming that goes along with that. And that's a lot. And it's a lot to manage with staff. They were also heavily impacted by COVID. Parks was the department that actually had staff pass away physically from COVID.
Oh, wow.
The only city department that was impacted by that. So there's a lot for them to manage. And when we want to be able to flex and do new things, I think it's important to say, hey, well, we're a resource for that. How can we help?
Yeah.
You want to bring in a new program, but to bring in a new program to a park, think about it like this. They have their budget that they get allocated once a year. They want to bring in a new program to the park because they got this one-time funding. That's great. They got one-time funding, which means they have to develop and execute a program to put in place, but they've only been funded one time, which means going forward, in order to fund that, they either have to get more funds or take those funds from another program to fund it. And that's sort of, what our role is. If they have the capacity to do that, great, then let's help them find those additional funds to continue running that program. I mean, that's effectively, what we're here for, is to fund supplemental needs.
Yeah.
Programming, for amenities and facilities. Like we had Admiral Kidd Park Playground burned down last summer. The director came to us, it was at our meeting the day after it burned down, and said, we'd like Partners of Parks to continue to consider launching a capital campaign. And so we did. And we've raised $475,000 for that playground.
Wow. What a valuable partnership between nonprofit sector and public sector, and in helping to really try to address those gaps, and of course funding. That's always important to make sure these programs continue.
I think there's a misconception in the community, maybe not by the entire community, but in large part, you think, oh, I have my tax dollars, they pay for my parks. Why do I need to give to parks? But your tax dollars, remember, are allocated across all city municipalities. The bulk of the budget traditionally goes to police and fire, that's public safety. And then parks is the next line after that. But parks also has the most staff and the most mileage to cover and to maintain, right? Because Parks, Recreation, and Marine is also, I can't remember off the top of my head, but miles and miles and miles of shoreline property as well, and beaches. So it's a very large responsibility.
Yeah, that's a lot for these budgets to cover too, right? There's so many diverse costs within those.
When the drought started, historically, before the drought, Parks was never charged for water. And then the city started charging them for water a number of years back. Well, that was a big hit. They didn't get allocated any more money, but they got, and why are our parks brown? Well, we live in a desert. It's hot. And to keep them green, we got to water more. And to water more, even with reclaimed water, we have to.
Can I just say that I totally underestimated all the knowledge I was going to learn today from our conversation with you. There's a lot there. And, and thank you for sharing that narrative and how even like public systems are heavily impacted. So this is a great example of how, these partnerships and collaborations can really help make a difference for local communities, because there are others like you who are really trying to not just make sure that we have a stronger infrastructure to address community needs as they emerge, as they're there, but also on the flip side of that, in partnership to try and close the gap on some resources that, these gaps need to get closed. So Trinka, as we wrap up our conversation today, and I always like to say, time flies when we have fun. And I always have a ton of fun on these interviews. What is your wish for, the community you serve, the wider community, the region, as we, start to, I think, normalize a little bit more the lessons learned from this COVID pandemic, and how our resources, hit the mark or maybe often fall short of the real need. What is your desire as communities are re-engaging again, I think, in person more and more?
My wish for our community moving forward, as we sort of emerge from the pandemic, is that we continue to work together to meet these needs. So did we think we were going to be doing food insecurity when the pandemic hit? No, but that's what the need was. And, I said to my board, we need to be thinking about what we can do. We can't do our traditional stuff. What can we do? So what I loved was these organizations working together, because everybody that had the means and the resources, wanted to jump in and help.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved that people said, well, this group needs help, because we were shining the light on who's providing services, who needs help, how can we help that? I loved the way the community came together to meet those needs, food insecurity being one, and then protection for the people who had to continue to go to work. Like I loved the way that came together, and I hope we don't lose that, because I don't think that the answer to solving our community's problems is to create another nonprofit because we have a great idea. Let's go find the community nonprofits or organizations that are providing the services that we are passionate about. Let's lend our expertise to them and connect these groups together so that we can impact more with the same resources. Because at the end of the day, we are all in search of the same finite pool of dollars. Mm-hmm. So the more people we add to that, the less there is. And I think we can do more by working together. And as we know, that we've learned from Meet the Funder, a historical TNP program and continuing program, that collaborative partnerships are favored in terms of funders. They want to see you working together in a way that you can continue to sustain yourselves in your program. Mm-hmm. And even if they stop funding you after 3 years, is your program going to continue, or does it rely entirely on their funding? So I think
so certainly, yeah, I mean, certainly collaboration impacts that sustainability equation one way or the other. But also, to your point and to your stories that you shared today, collaboration really helps us go so much farther, because it is a heavy load to carry, honestly, that there's a lot of work to do in the community. But Trinka, I just so enjoyed this conversation we had with you today. Thank you so much. I mean, honestly, I can't believe our time is practically up. But for folks who want to,
I really appreciate the opportunity. I love, I love the thoughtful conversation. I love having the chance to talk about Partners of Parks and our great community affiliates and partners. Because truly, it's not about us. We're a supportive organization, right? We're a support organization. We facilitate the magic. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy that it's a great role for us to be in. I mean, we're focusing on what we do best.
And so important, and I'll say this again, I think I said it in our previous chat, how important it is to recognize that facilitation of the magic, as you say it. That's such an important role in our community. So thank you, Trinka, and thank you to Partners for Parks for making our community a better place to live, and for modeling, a lot of this collaboration. So Trinka, really quickly, ways to connect with you. Email, if you prefer that, or
email is great.
Through Facebook.
Through Facebook is also great. Executive Director at partnersofparks.org. We look forward to seeing you out in full force in the parks this summer at Municipal Band and Movies in the Parks. And if you have any questions or want to get involved and volunteer, we would love to have your support. Just reach out. You can call our office. You can go to our website, partnersofparks.org. And I look forward to seeing you out in the park.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trinka. And we will be in touch again. And everyone, thanks for joining us.
Take care. Thanks, Carolina.